One of the country's top cops says organised crime is so rife in New Zealand it now needs its own government minister.
Organised crime is growing faster than New Zealand's ability to fight it.
And we're talking across a broad range of things here. We're talking cyber-enabled crime. We're talking exploitation of children, sexual exploitation. We're talking exploitation of migrants or people. We're talking drug dealing. There's a broad range of stuff occurring that's impacting our country, and we're no longer sort of this island in the bottom of the world that's not going to see this happen.
Organised crime is our number one threat to national security. The situation is so urgent that in February this year, a Ministerial Advisory Group on transnational and serious organised crime was launched by Associate Police Minister Casey Costello.
It struck me that there was a lot of silos in the way we respond to organised crime, and if you think of organised crime beyond the gangs that we see, this is, organised business enterprise making huge amounts of money out of anything they can make money from. Scamming, fraud, exploitation, child exploitation, drugs, whatever they can make money from, they will use it.
The advisory group's final report hits her desk today. I'm Alexia Russell, and in this episode of The Detail, I'm speaking to the group's chair about where we go from here.
It's frightening where this could go. It's frightening where it is already. I think if New Zealanders were in the discussions that I've been in with the senior members of enforcement, it would give them chills.
Steve Simon is a senior partner at Meredith Connell who has a wealth of experience in a world that most of us have no idea about.
I have been a Crown prosecutor for 20 years. And so in that time, I've been in the trenches doing prosecutions for the police on very serious crime. And then I went from that into doing work for a number of different government departments and their response to crime. So MB, Customs, DIA, MPI, whole variety of them.
He was also involved in a charitable trust doing work in relation to exploited migrants, which is where he met former cop Casey Costello. When she got into politics, she appointed him to the head of her independent organised crime task force.
And from there, we were set on our way with our terms of reference, and that was very much to come out with these monthly reports talking about how different topics in relation to organised crime, and culminating in this report we're about to produce for September with a solution to how we fight organised crime.
So in those 20 years, has it become evident to you that things are spiralling downhill?
Yeah, it's definitely, New Zealand is a different place than it was 20 years ago. The same could be said of a lot of places in the world. I think we've seen a downward trend in the nature of crime here. And I think there's some particular cliffs we've come across. The introduction of methamphetamine to New Zealand, that was a real turning point. It changed the nature of organised crime. If we look at our wastewater results, which is quite a good indicator, it shows that the methamphetamine use by our country has doubled since last year. The introduction of 501s, the mass deportation of members of internationally linked organised criminals back to New Zealand.
Australia's tough new laws mean that hundreds of Kiwis are being deported.
It's a pretty regular stream now. It's the change in the immigration laws that Australia introduced some time ago.
After a 3-year operation, police say they've now arrested nearly every single member of the Comancheros, the gang that arrived as a wave of 501 deportees from Australia and quickly made big strides in New Zealand's drug trade.
The Comancheros are as bad as it gets.
They are seen across Australasia as the most dangerous gang because of the transnational links they have and the propensity for violence.
That was also another cliff we've come off. And so we're in a place now where we are vulnerable, and organised crime is both a threat in terms of it's affecting us right now, worse than it probably ever has, but also when you do the research and you look at how it's playing out around the world, even as close as places like Australia, its potential is to get much worse again if we don't do something drastic.
And your task was to take a broad look, wasn't it? You're not just talking about drugs here.
No, I don't think you can say organised crime without drugs, but you could make the mistake of talking about drugs and forgetting that organised crime is much broader than that. organised crime is perhaps easy to explain by looking at large commercial enterprises. So looking at large businesses that say, we are here to make money however we can make money. And it's much easier for organised crime because they can do that without a moral compass. So they'll look at whatever commodity there is that will make them money, of which drugs is one of them. So methamphetamine is an obvious one. But what we're starting to see more and more of is them making money out of things like cyber fraud, migrant exploitation, the black market in tobacco. And so whatever the commodity is, they'll look to make money out of it. And so that's why the minister said, look, stand back and have this umbrella view and look at the whole problem, because you need to do that not just to confront organised crime as it is now, but also where it might be going. For example, there are things we don't have here like fentanyl, which organised crime are likely to try and bring into New Zealand at some point. And when that happens, that will be a new commodity, a new issue that we have to confront.
You said when, not if.
I think it is a case of when, not if. Ideally, we create a system that we can make it an if, we can keep it out. But we have to be realistic that when you look at somewhere like the United States and their experience with fentanyl and the harms that it's caused there.
We're in the midst of the worst drug crisis in U.S. history. Last year, more than 70,000 Americans died from fentanyl, a drug that is 50 times more powerful than heroin.
But also the significant profits that there are for organised crime. We are a consumer base, and so organised crime will try and find a way to make money out of our consumer base.
For a Ministerial Advisory Group, this is pretty fast-tracked. I mean, started this year, ends this year. You've just put your final report in, haven't you? But it's not been released publicly yet. Can you broad brush what was in that final report?
Yeah, it's been a very fast endeavour doing this work. I think that's been quite good in some ways. The benefit was that the people I had on the committee were all really experienced. So John Timms, who was a former Deputy Commissioner of Police, he brings a lifetime of experience in the police. Craig Hamilton, who is also a former senior member of the police, who was instrumental in the police's work in relation to money laundering and proceeds of crime, which is critical to the work we're doing.
Well, it's funding this.
Well, that's
advisory
right.
Group, isn't it?
And many other great endeavours. Jared Gilbert, who has obviously done a lot of work in relation to the organised crime space, particularly in relation to gangs, and so he brings a great intellectual perspective to the work we're doing. And Owen Loffenlechner, who comes from a great experience within the banks and working within the private business world, which again provided us another fresh lens to how we can not just look from a government perspective, but look to private business, look to the community as how we could collectively be involved. We've been doing these monthly reports at a hell of a pace, and now it's culminating in the September report. The monthly reports were looking at themes, if you will. So the first report was looking at explaining what organised crime is. The April report was looking at the financial driver, chasing the money.
There are some bad actors out there that are taking advantage of some of the workers coming from overseas, not paying them, no benefits, the conditions they work in, the conditions they live in. And New Zealanders just would not tolerate that if they knew more about that topic. Just removing cash from society would help those workers that come from overseas, because if they're getting paid and their money's going through a bank account, it's really transparent.
The May report was looking at the issue of corruption and what organised crime does to try and use corruption for their benefit.
9 baggage handlers and another staff member at Auckland Airport have been arrested as part of an investigation into a criminal drug syndicate. In total, 18 people face charges over the smuggling of 65 kilograms of methamphetamine and 3 kilos of cocaine, worth an estimated $24 million.
The June report was looking at the role the community can play in terms of the response. The July report was looking at information sharing.
More reported from the Ministerial Advisory Group on Organised Crime. So this time they're calling for more effective data sharing. Essentially, the constraints around information sharing is hindering government agencies in responding to organised crime.
Which is a huge problem for us to do the best we can in this space. And this last report we've done in August was in relation to accountability. This idea of We have great ideas, we have a great will, but we don't follow through on things in the way we need to. What we're doing in the September report is bringing all of those ideas together and saying, well, what does the solution look like? We've said in the August report that we consider it's necessary to have a Minister of Organised Crime. We do that in an environment where there's some reluctance to have more ministers of anything.
More regulation.
More regulation, and we're clear on that. We're not trying to create more, but we are trying to say this is a national security threat. This is a big problem for New Zealand, and we need to treat it with the respect that it needs. I would hope that wherever you sit in government, that looking at the threat of organised crime, of what it is and what it's doing and what effect it has on our community. This is not just something that affects drug users. It's not just something that affects people in gangs. The downstream effect that it has across our entire community, across our economy, is huge. And
have you quantified that?
That is one of the things we've said in our August report about accountability. The problem is we don't have great metrics on that. We have some things which help us, like the wastewater results, to show us the effect of, or the consumption of methamphetamine and how that's doubled in the last year. We have other things such as the number of fraud complaints, so we know that on average 1 in 10 New Zealanders will be a victim of fraud.
That's huge, isn't it?
It is.
You're not
huge.
just talking about Facebook Marketplace, you're talking about banking schemes, all that kind of stuff.
We've moved on from, a Nigerian prince asking you over text messages whether you'd cough up a bit of coin. We're moving into a new realm where it's, cyber fraud hubs set up in Southeast Asia. These are whole apartment blocks filled with people who are just working on these scams. So they don't set foot in New Zealand, but they will target economies like ours, target New Zealanders, and have scams which are becoming more and more sophisticated. We're moving to a point where we will have scams where they'll take your media presence, they'll see you on social media, your Facebook account, they'll see you on the news stories you've done, they'll pull your audio, and they'll be in a position where they'll be able to figure out from social media when you're on holiday, contact your loved ones using your voice, using the inflections in your voice, and say you've been robbed and you need money to get you through. We're leading into a whole new world of sophistication, and we kind of need to get ahead of that. Organised crime is learning and adapting. They're very, very big uptakers on any kind of AI or any other technology. They're fast to pick up new technology if it's going to create a commercial advantage for them.
So any chink in the armour.
Any chink in the armour, and particularly ones which mean they don't need to have boots on the ground. They don't need to worry about the risks involved in using people. I mean, if you think about that cyber fraud, they can do that in a way which means they never have to set a foot in New Zealand, but they get New Zealand dollars. The dollars get taken out of New Zealand and we get left with the harm.
Well, hopefully our dollar will be worth so little that they won't bother anymore, because that's the way we're headed.
There is an economic component to it. One of the things we've been saying is this is really important for our economy. New Zealand has prided itself on its reputation, right, in terms of how we are listed in the world in terms of integrity. The problem that we have is when organised crime becomes more deep-rooted, it challenges that. It challenges our reputation. We sink down in those standings, and that will directly affect us when it comes to things like free trade agreements. And it also exposes us, because when we do have agreements with other countries overseas, if we're not set up to make sure that whilst we have those agreements to get our economy flourishing, if we're not set up to deal with the necessary evil that comes with that, it's going to create even greater harm for New Zealanders.
In your September report, is there one big recommendation, or have you got a list? What are you telling the Minister?
The September report is really focused on the structure and the system to support that structure. So what we're saying is we need to have a Minister of Organised Crime, and to actually do things, to make it work, to make it robust, it needs to be supported by two things. It needs to be supported by a governance board, so a handful of chief executives who are focused and tasked with making sure we fulfil the Minister's plan or objectives. And then that board supported by a business unit, a team, if you will, a small team of about 30 who can go and help each of the agencies perform their function in relation to organised crime as well as possible, and also to make sure that each agency is not just doing their own work, but looking as to how they can help other agencies. So, for example, it's the IRD. We might want to look at how the IRD can do the best they possibly can in terms of their response to organised crime, but also look at how the information they hold, if it's properly shared, could help other agencies do their job to fight organised crime.
And would information sharing have privacy consequences?
Yeah, it does. And we talked about that in our July report. Information sharing is a key problem. Then there's many different facets to that. What we've said is we need to have some really frank conversations with the public about it, because I think part of it is just an understanding of what we mean. What we're saying is, at the moment, we have a number of enforcement agencies collecting information, and that information could be used in the fight against organised crime.
As long as people are willing to let that information be scrutinised.
As long as people are willing to let that information be scrutinised, and as long as we are very clear about who is accessing that information and for what purpose. I'm not here, nor was the committee here, to suggest we just soften our privacy laws and let information fly around. But we did want to look at information. For example, the IRD might hold information in relation to organised criminals about what money they're declaring or not declaring, or what money is kosher or not kosher. And it's that type of information we'd like to look at, whether that could be proactively shared so that we can ensure we have a complete response to organised crime. And we've given examples of setting up a data lake. There's many different names for it, but the idea is to say we have this information held by government in different little pots, little silos all around the show. What we're saying is we should get that information, put it into one place, and then we have controls on it. So we have controls on the information going into the lake, so we make sure that it's only information that might be relevant towards the fight on organised crime. And then we have controls on the information that is coming out of the lake. So what access someone who works in MSD might have would be very low level. So they wouldn't be able to access much of the lake. They could only access what they can currently get in terms of the data they need to do their job.
You can't go fishing in the lake.
Can't go fishing in the lake. But if you're the most senior members of our police who are dealing with organised crime, they might have broader access. And if they could have that collation of data and we could run AI over it so that we can pick out themes. So when we have things like the baggage handlers, we could see the anomalies. We could see the unusual details down to these baggage handlers working at particular times when imports coming through, or working on days they're rostered off, or those kind of features which we need to lean on the same technology that organised crime is using to combat them.
Needs a lot of data input for that kind of thing to be a success, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But it's one of those things where you could get success just starting off small and growing from there. And I think it was interesting the feedback we had in relation to the July report, because a lot of the feedback we got from the public was, I don't care if details in relation to my bank transactions are being used in that limited field by senior members of the police to target organised crime. I expect you to be targeting organised crime. I expect you to be doing that job. And so actually there needs to be a conversation there as to what we mean and what we're trying to do. And to get that balance to say, we are trying to fight this problem. This is a New Zealand problem. I'm not saying when we talk about the solution, it's not a solution for this committee. It's not a solution for the enforcement agencies. It's a solution for our country, because that's how we see it. It's a fight.
We also, though, need to be pretty sure that, we've seen the Beehive hacked. We need to be pretty sure that foreign actors are not, or even New Zealanders are not, managing to wiggle their way into this data lake.
Couldn't agree more. My point is that data is out there at the moment. It's held in a number of different silos, some more exposed than others. So don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting make ourselves more vulnerable. In fact, the contrary. We're saying if we have it in one place with controls and protections, we're probably safer than we currently are. When we're asking the public for the social licence to do some of this work, we're doing it off the basis that organised crime is a unique and particular threat. And so we need to target that as hard and as fast as we can.
Of course, if you want politicians to do things, it doesn't help to ring a few save money bells either.
And there is, anyone who's been in this game for a long time will know there's immediate save money bells going, because the reality is the costs for our community of, drugs, fraud, migrant exploitation, illicit tobacco, any of these things are huge. And so if we can get to the top of the cliff and stop some of these things coming into New Zealand, and also at the bottom of the cliff, strip the money off organised criminals before it's taken out of New Zealand and take that money and put it back into the system, it's huge. And we see that through things like the proceeds of crime work that is done. We're saying if we can broaden that, become more robust, and increase the money we take off organised criminals, that's obviously to New Zealand's advantage. It's an interesting thing doing this job. What you see is this disconnect between what's happening on the ground and often what the public understand. For example, let's take a topic. The black market in tobacco is an interesting one, because most people would say that's not an issue. And it's when I say to them, yep, sure, well, currently we have a black market in tobacco. And if I say to you, look across the ditch in Australia, they didn't have a problem. And then what's happened is black market tobacco's come in.
It doesn't surprise me that illicit tobacco is absolutely everywhere, particularly in Sydney and in regional New South Wales. These are drug syndicates, criminal syndicates that are involved in bringing this tobacco in from parts of Asia. I think this is a huge, criminal gangs and syndicates that are involved in this.
The average price of a pack of cigarettes there is about $50. The average price of a black market packet of cigarettes is about $20. And so you've got police officers who smoke black market tobacco in Australia because it's cheaper.
Isn't it?
And they go, well, it's not really a crime, but it's when you sit down with their task force, which has had to be set up, which is, I think, got funding of around $220 million for the next 4 years. That's how big the problem is over there.
Wow.
They've had to set up this task force to combat it, not just because the profits from black market tobacco are so great, but also because the profits were going not back into black market tobacco, but were going back into things like methamphetamine and cocaine. So these were enablers. That is back to the point about a commodity. It was a commodity, they're making a lot of money out of it, and it's going there. Then we come to New Zealand, where Australia is the ghost of Christmas future for us. What happens there will happen here. So we need to be ready for that as well.
Steve Simon says the group has recommended a 3-year trial of a new structure, including a new minister in the short term, but says we need to be thinking about a 30-year response to remove organised crime from our system for future generations.
We're not going to be able to stop organised crime. That's a global issue. What we can do is make New Zealand the hardest place to do organised crime so that we just deter organised crime from coming here. Just be too hard a market.
The group's final report will be publicly released after the ministers digested it, probably in about 2 weeks' time. That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. Thanks to Steve Simon. I'm Alexia Russell. Mā te wā.